Welcome to the Steadfast Podcast. I'm Jessica Howell, trauma therapist, and today we're going to be talking about a really important topic, especially as we move into the holiday season. Learning to identify what a trauma trigger feels like. If you've ever found yourself suddenly feeling anxious, tense, or even overwhelmed in a situation that seemed completely ordinary, this episode is for you. We're going to break down what a trauma trigger is, how to recognize the signs in your body, and some common triggers that tend to pop up during the holidays. So let's dive in. First, let's start by defining what a trauma trigger is. A trigger is any stimulus, a sound, a smell, an image, or even an emotional state that reminds your body and brain of a past traumatic experience. This happens because trauma is stored not only in your memories, but also in your body. So when a trigger occurs, it can activate that trauma response as if the event is happening all over again, even if it's not. What makes triggers tricky is that they're very subtle oftentimes. For example, you might not think twice about the smell of a certain candle or song that comes on the radio, but for somebody who's experienced a trauma, those small things can be connected to intense memories. The body and brain react instantly, often without conscious thought. Now, what does this look like in real life? Let's say you've had a traumatic experience during a holiday gathering in the past, like a big argument or a personal loss. As you approach the holiday season, certain things like the sight of holiday decorations, a familiar dish, or even the expectation of family time can trigger that trauma response. Your heart might start racing, or you might feel a sense of dread without really knowing why. You might even feel like you need to leave the room or start shutting down emotionally. These are signs that your body is responding to a trigger. So, what happens physiologically when you're triggered? When your brain perceives a threat, your autonomic nervous system kicks in, specifically your amygdala, the part of the brain that's responsible for processing fear. It starts signaling to the rest of your body that there's danger. This can lead to the release of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart rate increases, your muscles might tighten up, your breathing can become shallow. It's important to note that your brain is doing this to protect itself. It doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. So when you're triggered, your body is preparing to fight, flight, or freeze, or even fawn. The response where you try to please or pacify in order to avoid conflict. So recognizing these signs in your body is the first step forward to managing these triggers. One of the biggest challenges is that you might not always realize you're being triggered until you're already deep into the emotional reaction. But as you start to pay attention to your body, you might notice certain patterns. For instance, do you feel a tightness in your chest when you're around certain people, or maybe your hands get clammy when you're in a crowded place? These physical cues can be indicators that you're being triggered, even if the trigger itself isn't immediately obvious. Now, let's talk about the holiday season. Because this time of year that often brings up a lot of complex emotions and potential triggers. There are a few common triggers that I see in my clients during this time. So, family dynamics, if you have a complicated or strained relationship with family members, being around them during the holidays can be really triggering. Even if everyone seems to be on their best behavior, the underlying tension can set off that trauma response. Another one is memories of loss. The holidays are a time when many of us reflect on loved ones who are no longer with us. For people who've experienced the loss of a loved one, the absence can feel especially strong, and that grief can trigger a flood of memories or emotions. Next, we have sensory overload. The holidays are full of sensory experiences. Lights, music, and smells can be overwhelming. For some, these sensations can trigger memories of past traumas, especially if those traumas occurred during the holiday season. Next, we have expectations and pressure. The pressure to make everything perfect during the holidays can trigger feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, especially for those who have a history of trauma around failure or rejection. So, if you're feeling anxious or stressed as the holidays approach, it's important to start preparing now. The first thing you can do is to become more mindful of your body's signals. Start paying attention to how you feel in certain situations and see if you can identify what's happening in your body. Are you feeling tense? Is your heart racing? Are you feeling like you need to escape? Once you start recognizing these signs, you can begin to use grounding techniques to bring yourself back to the present. One effective technique is the 5-4-3-2-1 method, which focuses on engaging your senses to calm down the nervous system. Here's how the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique works. First, you identify 5 things you can see around you. Next, you'll notice 4 things that you can physically feel. Maybe it's the chair you're sitting in or the texture of your clothing. After that, listen for 3 things you can hear. Maybe it's the sound of your own breath or ambient noise in the room. Next, focus on 2 things you can smell. And then last, find 1 thing you can taste. Even just a sip of water or focusing on the taste in your mouth can help. By engaging all of your senses, you're pulling your brain back to the present moment, which helps calm that fight or flight response. It's a simple but effective way to manage triggers, especially in situations where leaving the environment isn't an option. Another important thing to consider is setting boundaries. If you know that certain events or gatherings are likely to trigger you, it's okay to limit your time or even opt out. You don't have to push yourself into situations that you know will be overwhelming. Your mental health and well-being are a priority, and it's okay to say no when you need to. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways. First, triggers are deeply personal, and they're often connected to memories that your brain and your body are holding on to. Identifying what a trigger feels like in your body is the first step towards managing it. Second, if you know the holiday season is a tough time for you, prepare in advance. Practice grounding techniques, set healthy boundaries, and give yourself permission to protect your mental health. And finally, know that it's okay to reach out for support, whether that's talking to a trusted friend or seeking professional help. You don't have to navigate this alone. Thank you for joining me today on the Steadfast Podcast. I hope this episode has given you some helpful tools and insights as we head into the holiday season. Remember to take care of yourself and listen to your body's signals. I'm Jessica Howell, and I'll see you next time.